Today I will cover the topic of getting the permanent residency and the need for the A2 exam for the permanent residency application. Because if there are some questions we get asked over and over again, those are these two. Like first, when do I qualify for the permanent residency? How is it calculated? And second, do I need to pass the language exam? So I'll try to explain everything and make it clear for you. First of all, before I start, this is not an open Q&A live stream, so I will be answering questions, but only related to this topic. If you have different questions to different topics, I'll be happy to answer them when I do another open Q&A live stream. So let's go into the topic, and maybe first, let me start with who qualifies and when they qualify for the permanent residency. So the general rule is that you can apply for a permanent residence permit after 5 years of continuous stay in the Czech Republic. That means that there can be no gaps in between your visas or residence permits, in the sense that you left the Czech Republic, your visa residence permit expired or was cancelled, and then you applied for a new visa. Obviously, there will be gaps in between, like your visas, because your one visa expired, and while you are waiting for approval of the new one, you don't have the new one yet. So there will be gaps like this, but there should be no there must be the continuity of your stay. So there must be kind of like visa, bridging visa, residence permit, bridging visa, residence permit, a different type of residence permit, this kind of continuity. If you break the continuity because you move out or your visa is cancelled or expired, then you're starting over. Now, the 5 years is a general rule, but it's not always like that. In some cases, it takes longer. In some cases, it takes shorter. So I will take you through everything. So let's start with EU citizens. EU citizens can also apply for permanent residence permit after 5 years of living in the Czech Republic continuously. The best is if you already have the registration certificate, because then it's easiest to prove how long you've been living here. But even if you don't have it, and you technically have no record of you living here with the Ministry of the Interior, you can still apply for the permanent residency. It's just a bit more complicated, so I've done another video separately about this topic. But EU citizens living here for 5 years, they can apply for permanent residency. Now, close family members of EU citizens, those spouses and kids, in some cases can be parents, but that's complicated. So let's say spouses, that's the most common scenario, and kids of EU citizens, like family members of EU citizens who are not EU citizens themselves. So let's say if I had a wife and my wife, I'm an EU citizen, I'm a Czech citizen, and my wife was not an EU citizen, she was from the US, for example, then she could apply for a residence permit as my close family member. And after 2 years of having the temporary residence permit as a close family member, she could apply for permanent residency. So close family members can apply for the permanent residency after 2 years, if at least 1 year of that they've been the close family member. So she would have to be married to me for at least 1 year out of the 2, but then she can apply after 2 years. Then distant family members of EU citizens, that means those who are not married or who are not kids or parents. So if you're, typically that's the partnership visa where you're dating each other and you're not married, and one of you is an EU citizen, the other one is not. So in that case, you can, as the non-EU citizen, apply for a permanent residence permit after 5 years, but only if the EU citizen already has the permanent residency. So you can technically both apply at the same time after 5 years if you've been here for at least 5 years, both of you. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that. It's just like that. You can apply after 5 years as a distant family member, but only if the family member of yours, the EU citizen, has a permanent residency. If it's a Czech citizen, that's fine, because that's being registered in the Czech Republic, having Czech ID, having an address here counts as a permanent residency from this perspective. So with a Czech citizen, you don't need to worry about that. But if it's another EU country citizen, then they must have the PR as well. Non-EU citizens, not related to EU citizens, there it gets more interesting or more complicated, if you will. First, students. Students are split into two categories. The not a real student category, let's say the other purpose of stay, the 99, and there all the student years count normally because you're not technically a proper student. So if you have the other 99 type of visa or residence permit, years count normally in most cases. Again, there might be exceptions, but in most cases that they count normally. If you are the proper student, meaning that you study an accredited program of a Czech university, then all your student years count as half. So let's say if you studied here bachelor's and master's for 5 years, those 5 years only count as 2.5 years towards the permanent residency. The counting is not the same. For example, if you want to switch to a business residence permit, which you can also do after 5 years, then the years are counted normally, but towards the permanent residency, they are counted as half. So if you studied 3 years of bachelor's, that only counts as 1.5 years. But once you switch to an employee card, for example, or to some other residence permit, those count normally and you can combine these. And when you reach like the 5 years in total, considering the halving part, then you can apply for the PR as well. There is also an exception for kids who can, for example, we've had a couple of these cases. It's kind of interesting, but we've had that. So one of the parents, all non-EU citizens, one of the parents is already in the Czech Republic and has a PR. The most recent case I remember was, I believe, an Indian guy who was living here for 5 years or longer, had a PR already, and then he wanted to bring his daughter. And if the daughter is, I believe, below 15 years of age, or 18, I don't know, I don't remember that. We don't do it that often, so I would need to refresh it. But if the child is below some age limit, the child can apply for a permanent residency directly through the embassy. So the daughter applied directly at the embassy for a permanent residency. She got it approved, so now she's here with the father, permanent residence holder, and the daughter, also permanent residence holder, without the need of being here for the whole time, for the full 5 years or whatever. Similar rules apply to kids born in the Czech Republic if the parents have the PR, because generally a child born at the territory of the Czech Republic must apply within 60 days for the same type of residence permit the parents have. So if parents have long-term residence permit, the child must apply within 60 days for a long-term residence permit. If parents have permanent residence permit, the child has to apply for a permanent residence permit within 60 days. So that's another exception when the child can get a permanent residency basically anytime without the need of living here for a certain amount of time. There are a couple more, but those are not that common, so I will not touch those. If you are in some specific situation, get in touch separately, like via email, and we'll discuss it then. But now, okay, one more. There is one more interesting category which I almost forgot, and that's blue card holders. For blue card holders, the rule is that they can apply for a permanent residence in the Czech Republic if they've reached 5 years of a blue card in total. That means also a blue card in some other country. So let's say if they lived in Germany for 3 years under a blue card, and then they moved to the Czech Republic and they've been living under a blue card, so it must be always a blue card. There cannot be like a blue card in Germany and like an employee card in the Czech Republic. Must be always a blue card. But if they spent 3 years in Germany, under a blue card and they come here under a blue card, then they can apply for a permanent residency after 2 years of living in the Czech Republic, because in total, with the 3 years in Germany, 2 years here, they meet the 5 years requirement. So it's still kind of like 5 years, but not necessarily in the Czech Republic. So that's another kind of interesting situation for blue card holders. And now, who needs to pass the language exam and who doesn't? It was kind of funny because that's it. Facebook, I find Facebook very, sometimes I hate it, sometimes I find it very interesting. Facebook is just like a weird place. Anyway, when I posted on Facebook that I will be doing this live stream, someone just went to the website of the Ministry of the Interior and copy pasted the exceptions I'll be going through and pasted it here and like put it the way that, okay, is this everything you will be talking about, or like you want to add something else? Kind of like I don't know. It was just a weird situation. Anyway, he forgot about two very important groups, and they often forget about that themselves. So I will take you through everything and I will explain everything. These two groups are basically EU citizens. They don't need to pass a language exam if they are applying for Czech permanent residency. I would normally, if you asked me, I would say that, okay, that must be kind of clear, but it's not. I've recently been contacted by someone who is an EU citizen, but they didn't want to apply for the PR because they thought they would need to pass the Czech language exam. So you don't have to. If you're an EU citizen, you don't have to pass the language exam. And the second exception is if you're a family member of an EU citizen. So if you have the temporary residence permit as a family member of an EU citizen, and it does not really matter if you are a close family member like the spouse or kids, or if you're a distant family member just having the partnership visa, in either case, you don't need to pass the exam either. So that's another of the advantages of being either an EU citizen or their family member, because that makes it way easier. And from the other, like from the non-EU countries perspective, let's say, that's standard thing is kids below 15 years of age and above 60. So just based on this requirement, if you're above 60, then you can apply for the PR. So we've also had a couple clients who just waited a couple more years when they were reaching 60, so they didn't have to pass the exam. So that's it for kids below 15. But again, for kids, there might be other exceptions, as I mentioned before. So yeah, but this is the general rule. Then if you studied some either primary school, secondary school, like high school or university in Czech language, or if you were in a program that was focused on Czech language, and if you studied that for at least 1 year within the last 20 years. So basically, if you studied officially a school in Czech, then it applies to you as well. It does not apply to the situation that you study like some Czech language classes somewhere in a private school, language school, anything like that. Unfortunately, that does not apply. But if you studied like a primary school, high school, university in Czech, then it applies. People with physical or mental disabilities, which makes communication more complicated for them. Of course, that needs to be, you need to have like a confirmation from a doctor. You cannot just like say, hey, I learn languages. I have difficulties learning languages, so please make the exception for me. You need to have it like with a doctor's stamp and like all that. I don't know how to call it in English properly. My brain is not braining that much today anymore, but you know what I mean. It cannot be just something you say yourself. You must have documents proving that from a doctor. And then the kind of last category is the most like complicated and like weird, because that's if you pass some other language exam, but that language exam must be accepted as the one they accept by the Ministry of the Interior. Typically, that would be like a leave-in exam for a Czech high school, for example, if one of the subjects was Czech language. Potentially, like if you already passed a language test for the citizenship, which would be kind of weird, but maybe you can you can kill two birds with one stone, because you will anyway need to pass that. So if you already pass it for the citizenship and then you apply for a permanent residency, which is one of the requirements for citizenship, so that might make sense, but I don't see it like too realistic, but it's an exception. Potentially, if you're trying to be a doctor in the Czech Republic, like through recognizing, let's say, your foreign education in the Czech Republic, not in the sense that you studied medicine in the Czech Republic. So if you're passing these exams for doctors or pharmacists or dentists, those exams are accepted as well. And then some specific exams like CE exams, like from specific schools that are allowed to do that. So if you pass at least the required level, which is A2, you can potentially use that as well. But then it gets a bit tricky, and it would be best to always ask, wherever you pass the exam, ask them, because they should know. They usually know. So that's the safest way. But if you're not really sure, if no one can tell you exactly, I would rather recommend you doing the exam than not doing, unless you have, a lot of time. Because the thing is that if you submit a proof of your like language exam to the ministry when you're submitting your permanent residence permit application, and it's not the correct one, or they don't accept it, then the ministry only gives you some amount of time to deliver the correct one. And depending on how much that time is, you might miss the deadline. Because, for example, now the standard Czech language test works the way that you need to put your name into like a long waiting list, let's say. And then whenever there is a spot for you, they will send you an email and a text message, and they offer you an exam, which might be also like a couple of weeks in the future. So you might be waiting for months. And if you only have 60 days from the Ministry of the Interior to deliver that exam like result, then it might eventually get denied. The application might get denied because of this. So, but of course, if you have like an employee card for 2 years and like right in the beginning you try to apply for the PR, that's fine. That's kind of safe, because even if you get denied, you still keep the employee card and you can try again for the permanent residency. So that's fine. But if you're not really sure, no one can really tell you, I would recommend passing the standard exam. Now, let's see if there are any questions related to the permanent residency. Because as I mentioned, this is not an open Q&A live stream. It should be just about the PR. So, Vasif Khan, sorry, a non-related question. So sorry, I will not be answering that today, but I'll be happy to answer it next time when I do open live stream. Chamuki Bazuki, what if I study remote from Charles University, Czech language classes? I take Czech classes at University Karlova, but live in the US. It's an online class. Yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. You will embarrass me in front of the whole internet right now. Because there are a couple layers. Okay, so if it's online, that might be fine, as long as it's legally possible to do it online and still like get the certificate and whatever. Because yeah, that's okay. The online part should be okay. But then what you study must be one of the schools that are allowed to provide this exam, which majority of language classes would not be, because those are usually not like accredited in this sense. The Charles University, they might actually be one of the schools that is allowed to do this. So I would say that in your case, that should be all right, but definitely verify with them, because that's kind of a specific situation. So verify with them, they will for sure know. Because if the schools can do it, that they can do provide the exam for a PR, they usually advertise it everywhere. Like that's the main advantage of the school. So they know that. If they don't know, then go the standard way. Hopefully that was good enough and not that embarrassing answer. And no name, please don't go in Czech, they don't grant you visa. Okay, that's not even a question. Okay, guys, that's it. There don't seem to be any other questions related to this. So thank you very much for joining. If you find this useful, please share it, comment it, like it, whatever will help to spread the message. And okay, Vasif Khan, if husband passes A2 exam and acquires the PR and wife is long-term visa Czech, also non-EU, generally no. If that's an adult, which hopefully your wife is an adult, then they need to go through the standard process and qualify themselves. Citizenship might be a different situation, and in some specific cases this could also work, but generally every adult should pass or should meet the requirements individually. Blah, blah, blah. Lila, so okay guys, you started asking questions. That's good. Let's see if they're all for the topic. I have long-term visa. My kids are studying here for 4 years now in elementary. Can they take PR without exam, even if I have long-term visa? I think this would be something I would need to discuss with you in more details. Generally, if they study, it must be like a Czech program. Generally, if they want to avoid the language exam, they should study in Czech. If they study in English or some other language, that would not help. But also the question is how old they are and if they can apply for the PR themselves and when. Yasin Jadidi, good evening. I would like to know if I should pass the Czech language exam for the permanent residency as a family member of Czech citizen. Thank you. You were not here in the beginning, otherwise you would know the answer. EU citizens and their family members, be it close or distant, they don't need the exam. You don't need it. So congratulations. Ramakrishna Manda, could you repeat about the first two groups that you mentioned? I don't exactly know which two groups you mean, but when I finish the live stream, the recording will stay on my channel. So if you go to the lives, there will be the recording. It might take some time depending on how big the file is. 25 minutes could take quite a long time, but once it's uploaded, it will stay on my channel. So just like come back to my channel tomorrow and the last recording in the lives will be this one. So you can go through that and watch it again. Okay, guys, thank you very much. Oh no, there's another question. I will never finish. Non-EU citizen husband has PR and his wife after how long? Yeah, again, that's generally the rule is that you need to meet the conditions separately. So wife generally after 5 years. Hi, is it necessary to pass B2 exam to Czech citizenship? What if I have citizenship from another EU country? That's not exactly to this topic, but there are some exceptions. Like being an EU citizen is not really an exception. There might be some other exceptions for the citizenship. Yeah, that's it. Have a blue card. Blah, blah, blah. I applied in Ethiopia. Thank you for support and your time. My pleasure. What do I have to do? Okay, so no more questions about this topic this time. So I will see you again, guys, Thursday, Monday, until the end of the world. Good night, guys. Bye-bye.